Appreciate the opportunity to be with you folks today. The developer days, especially in the automation space, is a sweet spot for me. As Omar mentioned, I've been around Cisco almost 25 years, and I have been an SME for Cisco roughly on 8 different technologies, ranging from IPv6, IP multicast, all the way to cloud native technologies, and now deep into the AI space. And so I think, kind of gluing all of those things together to understand what is this new Gen AI hotness and what does it mean to all of us that sling code and write scripts and try to get the most out of the infrastructure we're responsible for is a pretty good way to kind of kick off this event. So let's get started. So a quick view of the state of Gen AI. Not going to spend a lot of time here unless you've been living under a rock. You should know the basics of Gen AI, right? You should understand where we came from a predictive version of AI, basically a timeline of watching what is taking place over a period of time, and really looking at a time series database, capturing that information, and then making some sort of predictive analysis about what's going to take place in the future. And then generative AI is building on top of that concept of what can I do new with that predictive information. We're going to look at the state of the modern developer, and developer is a loaded word. It's as bad as security, right? Developer to you is a totally different definition to a developer to me. And so we'll talk about the nuances around the developer persona, what it means from a full stack developer to someone who's actually an operator or an admin that happens to use programming languages to help them. But there's a cross connection between those two and with Gen AI. And so it's the same tools and technologies that help them. And so we'll talk about where we join forces there and then wrap up. So, I think if you take a look at, the development space and where the focus is from a Gen AI point of view, it's really focused in 2 areas right now, and that is model review and selection and accessibility, or more specifically, where do you run things? So the current state of Gen AI in the development and operation space is really reviewing all of the closed source serving and open source models for all of the variety of text, code generation, code assistance, images, text to speech, video generation, all of those things, and trying to figure out the one or the combination of models that you want to assemble together to give you the best results. And so that's kind of where everyone's focusing. And if you look, what was hot on Monday is not hot on Friday. Because someone else has already, reported something that's a little bit better from one of the different model providers. The second part of it is, which is really important to all of us in the operations side of things, and that is, where do I run stuff, right? Do I run everything from the server, the serving entity itself, OpenAI or Mistral or somebody like that, and all I do is poke it with an API, or am I actually running this as an instance within a hyperscaler, or does some of that stuff actually sit inside of my on-prem? Does some of it sit in the middle somewhere in a colo? We're all trying to figure that out, right? And so that's the second part of where a lot of the research and focus is taking place. But no matter where we all kind of land from the maturity of that research, we are finally starting to understand that there absolutely are core benefits to utilizing Gen AI in very specific use cases around development. And that is obviously from a code generation and debug point of view, when you apply the correct tools at the right point along your workflow, you can yield faster deployment, faster development, and increased productivity. The problem with that is it's not repeatable in most cases, and it is not unilaterally true in all cases, right? And so we'll talk a little bit about that in a few slides, that you're not going to always get the exact same result every single time in the exact same tool set. And so we'll talk a little bit about that in a few slides. One thing that we are finding out, which is kind of almost an accidental side benefit of using Gen AI in the development space, is knowledge sharing. This is where you got 2 teams that now have to work together in a collaborative way. Maybe they're completely different frameworks, completely different language types that now they have to work together. they're actually using GenAI to very quickly come up to speed in someone else's language or framework, and now understand the words someone else is using now resonate with me. And so it could be that you're a hardcore Python person, and now you've got to go and understand a little bit of cloud native networking stuff that someone wrote in Go. You can actually go and pull their Go code into your IDE and let GenAI review that and explain it to you like you're a Python developer. And now suddenly some of this stuff actually resonates with you. And so knowledge sharing is definitely one of them we're seeing. And then we'll talk a little bit more in a few slides around the sweet spot in GenAI right now is doing unit testing, function testing, end-to-end testing, and then eventually solution testing. So we'll talk about what some of that stuff looks like. And then finally, all of this is sitting down on the common AI use cases that you would expect, machine learning all the way down to chat bots, assistants, and agents. Now, this aspirational view are the things that my team within Cisco DevNet and other startups and other groups around the world are starting to look at, and that is what other places within the developer workflow can leverage GenAI, right? And so this is very, very important for this audience, which is the impact on automation and then things like infrastructure CI/CD flows. So imagine that you are using an AI assisted workflow that is watching your basically the time that you are reviewing PRDs and design requirements to the time that you sling code, to the time you check in your code and do reviews, to the time it makes it through your pipeline, you do test, and it makes its way into production. So if you had something that actually watched that entire pipeline and watched build delays and watched issues where you actually had build servers take too long to pull in an image, right? That was not in cache. Whatever that case might be, it's actually looking at that way more than just a prediction over a time series. It's actually telling you these are things you can improve along the way, both from a human optimization method and also a tool method. And these are things that are taking place right now, especially in the CI/CD space. So this is stuff that from DevNet's point of view, you're going to start seeing on developer.cisco.com, where we're actually going to start publishing documentation around best practices to optimize CI/CD, infrastructure as code recommendations and stuff like that to go and leverage GenAI to help you with some of those automation elements. We'll talk about proactive management and self-optimizing infrastructure in a few slides, so I'll save that there as well. One final thing here around the infrastructure play is this is Splunk, this is full stack observability, this is what everybody is into is the observability hotness, right? And this is very important where we are utilizing AI not only again in the predictive use case, but also in the generative use case where we are looking at, again, logs, finding interesting information around a massive amount of log output. Not only just finding anomaly detection, that's kind of a yawn, it's table stakes. Everybody's doing anomaly detection on log, right? But going out and actually taking multiple feeds of logs, correlating them together and deriving some sort of value. This is certainly a hot space within AI. And then finally, the human in the loop aspect here, where AI is handling those routine tasks that you hate doing, but also you are also checking off things that you don't quite trust the AI to be doing, right? And so we'll talk a little bit about this as well in the next few slides. So the state of the developer, I mean, all of us on here use something in this screen, right? If you are perfectly aligned to a specific language or a framework, you've got very specific types of databases. You got your favorite IDE, right? Let's not get into the Emacs versus Vi, debate. That's almost religious and political all in itself. Whatever pipelines you're forced to use, there's a lot of stuff that's in here that we're all responsible for. And then when you turn things on the side and you look at this shift left model over here that started off with better testing, moved to security, made you do now open telemetry and things like that inside your code base, there's a lot of stuff over here clear on the left. And so this is what we're responsible for from all of the developer and operational things and what I call the hard responsibilities. We've also got the soft responsibilities that we're all, kind of in charge of. We've got to go and gather requirements a lot of times through physical interviews or through documentation reviews. We've got to do some sort of design through a combination of 10 or 20 or 30 different tools and tech that we've got to be responsible for understanding. We probably have to communicate with people that we don't actually like. And then we eventually get to do what we're paid to do, which is write, debug, and test code. That's actually what I enjoy doing, right? And it's clear over here on the right-hand side for me to get to. And if you happen to work in an institution that is a you write it, you own it kind of view of the world, then you're partially or fully responsible for also being your own SRE, right? And so this is an additional burden for you, not just writing the code and throwing it over the fence for someone else to own. You actually are responsible for operating that code. And then finally, the thing that absolutely all of us enjoy is writing our own documentation, right? Open API specifications, maintaining our own Terraform code between one version to the other. Of course, that never breaks, right? And then maintaining and documenting our code. So, when we look at all of this stuff, both the hard reality of what we do from an operations and code development point of view and the soft things that we're responsible for, we also have additional things coming our way, right? It used to be that we had all of these elements that we talked about in the previous two slides, but we also now have to be a little bit more aware of where our code runs. It used to be that I could write my Java code or I could write my Python code and I would check it in after reviews and it just went into never land and I didn't really care about where it went. I didn't care about if it was running on the edge, if it was running in an on-prem data center, or it was running as a containerized version. But nowadays, I actually kind of am sort of responsible in many cases of where that stuff runs. Is it going to run in a Kubernetes environment? What is the runtime that I need to build that against? Is there security aspects that I need to build in that from an API security point of view? Am I doing manual instrumentation with OpenTelemetry or auto instrumentation with OpenTelemetry? There's all kinds of things that are clear over here on the left-hand side of my development workflow that I need to be responsible for, right? So there's just more and more stuff coming. Well, guess what? GenAI is one more thing coming, right? And so let's talk about linking these things together, not from a burden point of view, but actually from an opportunity point of view. So let's take a look at that exact same view that we had before from the real tools and services view and look at some of the early intersection points from an AI point of view, right? And so a lot of these things that are kind of orange, whatever that color is from your view, are actually moving their way towards green very quickly, right? And so the real places that everyone is aiming right now, obviously in the code editors, version control, API development, mocking, all of that other stuff is pretty strong in the AI space. If you're a database player and you're not getting involved in vector databases, things like that, where you're pulling embeddings in from your LLMs with external data and pushing them as vectors for similarity searching and things like that, you're probably not going to be in the database space too long. That stuff is absolutely moving that way. Obviously, all the cloud and hyperscaler are in this space. And then everybody that's in the test harness framework, security, observability, and IAC spaces, they're all kind of there, right? And so you'll start to see this thing fill out with a rainbow of colors from a maturity point of view over a period of time very, very rapidly. Now, what I'm going to do here for the remainder of time is we're going to kind of break down this CI/CD type of functional workflow a little bit. We're going to talk about some of the areas that we're doing some research, some of the customer engagements that we have, and kind of talk about where people are at from their operational workflow, especially in the network operations side of things. What kind of research are they doing? What are some of the things that are scaring them? And where some of the opportunities are. So first and foremost, code assistance, right? This is one of the hot areas that everybody's talking about, GitHub Copilot. And I think there's a talk tomorrow somebody's doing around coding assistance, so I'm not going to burn this one to death. But Cursor probably, if you actually go and look at all the survey results that come out about monthly from a lot of the developer things, Cursor certainly is the one, even above GitHub Copilot, is probably one of the hottest things out there as it relates to the highest fidelity from a quality point of view around reliable code results, right? It is just purpose built, really, really a tight IDE from a quality point of view. I sling code every day in GitHub Copilot, and my results are it's okay, right? I'm not going to build a top to bottom application. I might use it to build some unit testing. I might use it to go through and do a couple thousand lines of code and refactor something in it. But it's got some work for it to get done. But it is definitely starting to find its way into the workflow of the average developer. What we're starting to find opportunities for is integrating Copilot in the workflow for IAC. It seems to be better than regular code language like Python, Node, and so forth for things like Terraform, where you're actually asking it to go build, give me a Terraform provider for blah. And it seems to be fairly decent at that in a repeatable way. The next thing that we utilize a lot of this stuff for is software testing, right? And so this is a very rapidly developing space. So I've written my code and now I want something to go and generate new test cases or new test for. So unit test, end-to-end test that are aligned to a specific framework that you're in love with from that point of view. One area that we find to be interesting in this space is things like PyATS that we've got on developer.cisco.com, matching that up with the Genie SDK. So if you've done any kind of network-oriented coding with PyATS, we would like to bolt that into something like the /test functionality you get with GitHub Copilot, and actually pull in your own custom test harness into your IDE. And let GenAI run test builds from that custom test harness, right? And so there's some unique stuff that's going on there. And then you bolt that to your own real private data set or a synthetic data set that you can mock against API endpoints or whatever the case might be. And so this integration test space is moving very, very rapidly. And this is a pretty interesting space to pay attention to. The next thing is around operational efficiency. And this is bolting the old school predictive model to the Gen AI space. So applying generative AI to your time series database kind of view and allowing it to make new recommendations. And so kind of watch this space called React, which is reason and action. And this is basically reasoning through the data it has and recommending or physically taking action against that recommendation. So this is a really powerful space, especially in network operations, where it can take a look at your BGP table or your ISIS table and making a recommendation of how you optimize pathing rules, whatever the case might be, and then ultimately allow you to actually cut that over into some sort of action from there. So again, more interesting things for you to look at, and there's going to be some talks, I believe, this week on this as well. Then the final thing here in this particular space, before we move on here, is again around infrastructure as code. So everything that we just talked about applies to IAC, CodeGen, test harness, PyATS I mentioned, and then again, flipping that operational model against things like Terraform, Ansible, CDK, CloudFormation, all that stuff is something that we're watching very close. So these are all things that we're going to be talking about this week at this event, and they're all hot areas to pay attention to. So that was a quick blast. I kind of want to set some of that stuff up. I know day two, there's some topics directly related to this. And so I don't want to steal any thunder from anybody, but this is a topics that are going to be top of mind for you from an operations and a development point of view. And it's a pretty exciting space. And you got to look at GenAI as not just a tool, but it actually is an enabler to take away things you hate doing, right? And so that's really a focus for the DevOps space. There's a lot of tools out there, and you want to kind of start gravitating towards a platform approach to kind of simplify and abstract away the complexity of that. And so again, we'll be talking about that through workflows and other tools around that space. And then again, pay attention to developer.cisco.com. We have an AI hub there that you can pay attention to, and you'll start to see the platform reviews, the API documentation against AI infrastructure that we have, and you'll see a lot more content coming your way from DevNet.